With Marvel movies coming out and smashing box office records somewhat regularly these days, a lot of folks say that they're tired of the superhero genre altogether. They say that a decade of empty Marvel movies is quite enough and wish that Hollywood would focus its energy on other things. Hi, I'm Jeremy. With all due respect to these folks, I would like another decade, and I'm here to tell you why superhero movies aren't as bad as their critics say. Just so you know, I'm mentioning all sorts of Marvel movies, but most of the references that could spoil a movie for you are in relation to Avengers Endgame. So here are 6 of the biggest and most common criticisms of Marvel films and why they're wrong. Let's get started. Number 1, I don't like Marvel movies because I don't like fantasy. This is probably one of the most reasonable criticisms. I'll grant that if you don't like fantasy, you probably won't like most Marvel films. More on this later, but there's a lot of stuff in the Marvel universe that doesn't involve too much fantasy. But at the same time, for real lovers of this genre, the fantasy element is part of what makes them great. Indeed, for me, one of the singular greatest moments in Avengers Endgame was the moment where you see Spider-Man riding on Pegasus, attempting to escape an attack of space aliens while holding a glove filled with magical stones. For me, it was pure gold. Number 2, I don't like Marvel movies because they're dumb action movies made for pubescent boys. In fact, it was James Cameron, the director of Terminator 1 and 2, Aliens, and 2 of the highest grossing films of all time, Avatar and Titanic, that last year really captured this idea with the following quote. He said, quote, "I'm hoping we'll start getting Avengers fatigue here pretty soon. Not that I don't love the movies, it's just, come on guys, there are other stories to tell besides hyper-gonadal males without families doing death-defying things for 2 hours and wrecking cities in the process. It's like, oi." Why is this view wrong? Firstly, Marvel's protagonists aren't the testosterone-fueled imbeciles that Cameron describes. Okay, pre-Endgame Hulk is exactly that. But as a concept, at least in the comics, and somewhat in the Ang Lee film, this element of the character's persona makes him compelling precisely because it's a problem. It's about a man struggling with the rage that's inside him and the destructive impact that rage can have. Furthermore, if we take Hulk by Endgame, Banner's intellect has merged with his id-like Hulk self to create a smart Hulk. Smart Hulk even manages to unintentionally parody himself when he goes back in time in 2012 and tries to act like his non-brainy self. Maybe to some extent, the gonadal criticism can be leveled at Thor in the first 2 films, but arguably this is why Loki's more layered character won the hearts of fans. Thor's character too really develops throughout the Marvel films. In Avengers Infinity War, you see that even the demigod has a human side as he struggles to maintain his bravado in the face of enormous loss. Finally, in Endgame, Thor is really suffering. He's put on weight and become an alcoholic. That's real vulnerability there. Perhaps few characters embody this notion to a greater extent than one of Stan Lee's most famous creations, and the one that really launched Marvel Comics to fame, that being Spider-Man, the story of Peter Parker, a teenage nerd from Queens, New York, who suddenly finds himself imbued with great power and great responsibility.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
And finally, Cameron said that these Marvel heroes are, quote, males without families. Firstly, they're not all males, but I'll get back to that later. Secondly, without families, Peter Parker has Aunt May. Thor has an all-star family with the god Odin, played by Anthony Hopkins, Frigga, played by Rene Russo, and Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston. Or does Cameron mean he wants to see these characters in father figure roles? No problem. How about Ant-Man? In Ant-Man, the character of Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, is a divorcee who just wants to pay his bills so that he can have a comfortable apartment for his daughter Cassie to see him at on weekends. Or Hawkeye, the character of Clint Barton, played by Jeremy Renner, who is married with 3 kids who seem generally happy and healthy despite an apparent predilection for mayonnaise on their hot dogs. Or there's Iron Man, the movie that kicked off the modern Marvel film franchise. Director Jon Favreau picked Robert Downey Jr. for the role because he thought that he could play the role of a, quote, likable asshole. Both Stark in the comics and Downey in real life struggled with and overcame problems with some substance abuse, and Favreau's gamble obviously paid off. Furthermore, in the films, you see Downey develop from a billionaire playboy in the first Iron Man movie to a husband and father who sacrifices everything for humanity in Avengers Endgame. By and large, a Marvel character like Iron Man derives his popularity because he has a heart, because he's human, unlike the Terminator. Not to get too down on Cameron, after all, when Endgame overtook Titanic for the title of the 2nd highest grossing film of all time, Cameron did very graciously tweet, quote, "To Kevin and everyone at Marvel, an iceberg sank the real Titanic. It took the Avengers to sink my Titanic. Everyone here at Lightstorm Entertainment salutes your amazing achievement. You've shown that the movie industry is not only alive and well, it's bigger than ever. By the way, Avengers Endgame may also overtake Cameron's Avatar to become the highest grossing film of all time. Endgame's now earned $2.5 billion at the box office. If it earns $260 million more, it'll do just that. Number 3. I don't like Marvel films because all the heroes are white males. There's no diversity. A single scene in Endgame, which plot-wise was definitely over the top, but yet was cool enough for many to forgive anyway, was the scene where Captain Marvel, played by Brie Larson, who at the moment is probably the most powerful superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has to get the Infinity Gauntlet past Thanos' horde of space alien monsters. Suddenly, Okoye, Scarlet Witch, Shuri, Wasp, Gamora, Nebula, Mantis, Valkyrie, and Pepper Potts wearing an Iron Woman suit all step forward to clear the path for Captain Marvel. The symbolism seemed like a not-so-subtle way for Marvel to flip the bird at anyone claiming women are underrepresented in Marvel films. As for the inclusion of people of color, the most obvious movie to point to would be Black Panther. The film, which had a black director, a black lead, and a majority black cast, struck a chord with filmgoers. It not only didn't hide from issues of race and identity, but dealt with them head-on in a plot that reverberated with audiences and garnered critical praise. Community groups across the United States purchased tickets to it so that African-American youth would have the opportunity to see someone of their own race represented in a major Hollywood film. Furthermore, many may see some symbolism in Captain America, played by Chris Evans, passing the role onto Sam Wilson, who is played by Anthony Mackie. The symbolism being that an African-American man can now be a kind of representative of America's better values just as surely as a white man can. Furthermore, if the movies continue to derive inspiration from the comic books, we're likely to see even greater diversity. Sony's Marvel film, Into the Spider-Verse, featuring Miles Morales, the son of an African-American father and Puerto Rican mother, Endgame directors Joe and Anthony Russo have said that at least one of the existing characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe will be revealed as LGBT. J.K. Rowling will also be taking over for Kevin Feige as president of Marvel Studios. No, I'm just kidding. That's not happening. Number 4. I don't like Marvel movies because they're all the same. While they may all involve superheroes, in many ways superhero movies are a number of genres wrapped into one. Captain America: The First Avenger is one of an adventure movie. Captain America: The Winter Soldier is very much an action movie. Guardians of the Galaxy is a space opera in the vein of Star Wars and is in fact leagues better than at least some of the Star Wars prequels. Ant-Man is a comedy heist. Jump over to Fox's Marvel and the upcoming New Mutants is, of all things, a horror movie. Deadpool almost feels like some kind of combination of a Kevin Smith film, a 70s ninja film, and a Warner Brothers cartoon. Thor Ragnarok is sort of like if Flash Gordon, the Gladiator, and Jeff Goldblum had a baby. It's going to be very interesting to see what'll come in the next phases of Marvel's evolution. There's enormous room in the Marvel Universe, from street-level characters like Daredevil, Punisher, and Jessica Jones, to mystic characters like Doctor Strange, Morbius, and Ghost Rider, to cosmic characters like the Eternals, Adam Warlock, and my all-time favorite character, the Silver Surfer.
All that you know is at an end.
I mean the Silver Surfer from the comics. Number 5. I don't like Marvel films because I don't like things that a lot of people like. I've actually gotten this reason before, but in my mind, not liking something because it's popular is kind of a popular thing to do. You're actually kind of following a herd there, so maybe you should go against the grain and just like what you like regardless of whether something is or isn't popular. Number 6. I don't like Marvel films because they're unoriginal and formulaic. First off, Marvel has done something that's never ever been done in cinematic history. It's created 20 films, all existing within a single universe that is more or less continuous. That's pretty cool. Someday, audiences may crave fewer superhero films, just as they've craved fewer cowboy films. But I think a lot of people will look back and think of this as a sort of golden age, where Hollywood was unabashedly making big Hollywood films that didn't suck. Unlike what tends to happen with sequels, Marvel films don't get steadily worse. They tend to get steadily better. Iron Man 1 may have been better than 2 and 3, but Thor Ragnarok, the third in the line, was the superior. Likewise, for my taste, Captain America: Civil War was the best. While I felt like Doctor Strange could have been a lot more than it was, I can say without reservation that new films like Black Panther and Captain Marvel were just good. And the first 2 Avengers movies, which were already pretty epic, had nothing on Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. I honestly don't know how Marvel can go up from here. Endgame was just epic. Now, These may not be the works of Stanley Kubrick, David Lynch, Wes Anderson, or Steven Soderbergh, but loving the works of these directors does not mean you also have to hate Hollywood blockbusters. In general, Marvel creates great, big movies, using some storytelling tropes that have not only long been around in cinematic history, but many of which have existed since humans started telling stories to one another, be it about the ancient Greeks or the heroes of World War II. In general, Marvel knows this. It owns it, and it defiantly proclaims the right to make these kinds of movies. This is never better symbolized than in the final scene of Endgame, where Steve Rogers returns to the love of his life, Peggy Carter. In true, unabashed Hollywood style, the two share a final, beautiful kiss, bringing the film to an end and also bringing an end to what's been one of the most exciting chapters in modern cinema history. Finally, if you're one of those folks who says, I don't like Marvel films, my question is, have you really given them a chance? If you have, it's okay, we still love you. But have you really given them a chance? And for you Marvel fans out there, fear not. As long as Marvel films continue to break box office records, you can be sure the studios will keep making them. So please, tell us your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Marvel should quit while it's ahead and stop with these superhero movies? Does anybody think Marvel movies are getting worse rather than better? Thank you for watching, and see you next time on OSSA.